Welcome to Brave. Be inspired by the best leaders of Southeast Asia tech. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. I'm Jeremy Au, a VC, founder, and father. Join us for transcripts, analysis, and community at www.jeremyau.com. Hey, Jes Min, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. So nice to speak to you on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, I'm glad we get to hang out again, from Bain days all the way to Clubhouse and, here again. So it's nice to catch up.
Same.
So, Jes, tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you yet.
Well, what's interesting about myself? Not much really. I started out my career as a consultant. I was in Accenture for about 6 years, and then I moved over to Bain and Company, where I met you, obviously. And in the middle of my Bain experience, I skipped out to do an MBA in France for 1 year. Came back to Bain, and then did a couple of years there, and then suddenly realized that I should put the skills that I obtained all those years, right, to try and create some sort of impact in a cause that I really believe in. So I left to start up my own startup with two co-founders, and then here we are.
Yeah. So, it's amazing because you've had such a journey, kind of growing up in Malaysia, and then kind of having that, regional role across Southeast Asia as a consultant. And then, of course, doing an Insead Mba, not just any school in France, but, in Insead Mba. And obviously doing well as a case team leader at Bain and being a founder of, Southeast Asia's #1 home and property services platform. So, not trying to hey, don't short sell yourself a little bit here. So, so tell us more. Was it growing in Malaysia? Why did you decide to become a consultant? Was it like the thing to do, or was it like your parents were like, yes, bagus, very good,
No. So, my parents, they were something like second generation immigrants, right, from China. So my
Right.
parents were, born and bred here. So me too. I grew up very much in the city, even though they were both from small villages. They moved to the city, and I always grew up in the city, lah. So the typical, overprotected childhood for girls, very very common. When we were young. I was not allowed to do anything really. And they would never allow me to go and have slumber parties at my friend's house, or do crazy stuff like that. I remember my first major win was being selected to be a Girl Scout, and then we could all go camping. And then my parents never really trusted the fact that all the scout leaders and all that could manage all these male and females, of various ages living in tents. So every night they would actually come to the campsite and tempt me to go home and spend the night there. And then the next morning they'll fetch me back again, because they just never trusted any sort of authority, right?
Yeah.
So they will come and they'll bring me my food, and then they would say, hey, why don't you just go home and sleep in your comfortable bed? And then tomorrow morning we'll bring you back here and no one will know. And the truth is that most of the time I did, right? So I went home, the next morning I came back, right? So I was always known as the lembik one, the one who couldn't survive the night. So I grew up most of my childhood thinking actually I'm quite lembik one. I cannot survive it one. And then I went off to university. It was quite tough, being overprotected and all that. It took me kind of a few years to really develop into my own person. And then I guess at the point of university, I did what the typical overprotected child would do, go crazy, and then started to do all sorts of things that they didn't do when they were young. So that's where you have it, right? So all the going to MBA mid-career and all those crazy stuff, and doing internships in East Africa, and they all came out of an overprotected childhood. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't feel like you were very crazy because you went through University of Bath, and I mean, I'm just have your LinkedIn up here, right? You were president of the Malaysian and Singaporean Association. You were the treasurer of another club. You had first class honors. So it doesn't feel like you were very crazy.
I think the crazy part started sort of after I graduated, and I started working, and then Yeah, I took a lot of career breaks actually. Some of the crazier things I've done is obviously going to study Chinese in China and saying
That's not
like,
crazy.
yeah, no, that part was the good part, and then the crazy part was like taking a 24-hour or 27-hour journey on a train by myself to the middle of some city that no one's heard of. So these is where I usually envelope crazy within the very reasonable things I do so that nobody ever finds out.
Well, doesn't sound crazy. Sounds more like courageous to me. Brave even. And so yeah, I mean, obviously, my parents are Malaysian. They grew up in Penang and KL. So, common story, obviously, of going out to the UK to study. And then at some point you were like decided to come back to, kind of like Southeast Asia, right? And join Accenture. So what was that decision for you like?
Well, at the time, when I was graduating, it was somewhere like 2003, 2004. Firstly, it wasn't easy to look for jobs because getting a visa was a problem. Then I did get a job, right? And it was crazy enough, a railroad engineer, something that I've always wanted to do because I studied mechanical engineering, and I always thought that that would be the kind of person I'll turn out to be. So I got an offer, very prestigious engineering firm and everything, and I wanted to stay. But then my dad asked me to come home, and I think he saw that a lot of the opportunities at that time was back in Southeast Asia, and all my
Mm,
family was there. I'm very close to my family, my extended family as well. So he said, "Come home lah.
right.
Why stay over there?" So I decided to come home lah, and it was no regrets lah to this date. Yeah.
So here you are, a master's of mechanical engineering. You joined Accenture. What was it like becoming a Accenture management consultant, a strategy manager? Was it a big culture shock from engineering to consulting, or was it more similar?
No, not much actually. But the truth is that I didn't know what I was going to do as a consultant. I mean, nobody really knows, right? They have all
Yeah.
these nice slides and stuff, and they tell you you're solving problems and all this jazzy stuff, and you're like, you have no idea really. So I just joined, and then I think they stuck me in technology. They stuck me with a bunch of the most techie of the techie. Those people who are like designing enterprise architectures and middleware layers and all that stuff. Even though I said I wanted to do strategy, they stuck me in there. And then I think I crashed a server. I think I rewrote another one. Completely rewrote my own drive. So
Oh
after 2 weeks,
no.
seriously, I was playing with a virtual server, and then after that, I left the formatting disk in there, and I reformatted my entire device, and then I had to go crawling back to IT to say, "I'm so sorry, I reformatted this thing. Can you set it up again for me?"
Well, that's not so
And
bad, right? You didn't lose anything, hopefully.
I don't know. I probably lost a whole bunch of stuff, lah. But I think yeah, it took me a lot of interesting disasters like that before they decided to say, okay, we're gonna need to limit the amount of damage that you can do to our server rooms. So we're gonna slowly move you out to strategy. Yeah, so it was. I could say it was a strategic move on my behalf, to try and move verticals.
I think you're short selling yourself a little bit because there's quite a lot of great work across the region. So not much of a culture shock for you, and then you decided to go from Accenture to Bain. So what was that transition like for you? Was
That
it
was
like you reached out to them? They reached out to you? What happened?
It was very interesting because I was working on a very huge plantation merger. And obviously, you have consultants swarming in all directions. So there was the Accenture
Yeah,
bunch with their project and program management. That was what I was doing, and like
yeah,
6 different work streams. And then there were the Bain guys and other consultants as well. Working
right,
on the strategy part for the
right,
different business models. Yeah. So I guess
right.
they saw me in action, and despite all the crazy things I did, they decided that I was a good fit. So maybe an offer lah. So I moved because I wanted to see what a true blue strategy consulting firm, how they actually approach problems, what's the methodology that they used, and there were a few partners which I felt were quite inspirational at that point. So I moved over.
Yeah, and what was that
Yeah.
transition like for you? Was it a culture shock? Was it very different?
It was very different actually, from one consulting firm to the other one, because Accenture is more, in terms of program project management, a lot more structured, a lot more process driven and methodical. Looking at things in Bain, I think Bain as a consulting firm has quite a heavy private equity due diligence mindset as well. So moving over from Bain, I had to relearn actually a lot of the things about, when you look at value, where do you focus, estimating how much the value is, and how to really quantify what is likely to come out of, doing certain initiatives. So from that perspective, I think what I learned in Bain really, really, really helped in entrepreneurship, where you kind of need to make a decision almost on a weekly, monthly basis, what to focus on and what not to focus on.
I think that's super undervalued as a what Bain trains, right? Because I think
Yeah.
I always remember that it was like strategy is what you choose and also what you choose not to do, right? And
Yes.
then in more importantly, it's about the decision velocity, right? Like how fast do you make decision and how fast do you execute from it and how fast do you learn from it and then pushing forward with the cadence and the structure needed to make that be as fast as possible. I thought that was a
Mhm.
tremendous learning I had as a consultant and that's where I met you as well, right?
Yes.
I remember
Yes.
meeting you, and you were super high energy and very optimistic, and we were working on a bunch of slides and stuff together for I don't know a small chunk of time, a month, I think.
Yeah, I think it was a short time, yeah. But there was a lot of slides, right? I mean, slide making.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
it's like
yeah,
our true skill, not strategy, but slides. Right?
yeah. The speed of
No,
slide
strategy
making.
and slides. Yeah, speed of slide making. Yeah. What was your impression of me back then? Maybe you had to edit this out afterwards.
Well, I always felt that you were a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah, different from the typical consultant, I think. I mean, you obviously, have the lingo and, the smarts and everything, but there was something about you that was, always willing to try something different and taking
Right.
a different perspective. Yeah. So I guess, that kind of like, explains a little bit why you shaped your career like that after that.
Yeah, definitely. It was something that I was thinking I didn't really understand back then because I was like, okay, this is how I think about this problem. And but I really enjoyed being, I think, great high performance culture, great folks. I actually really enjoyed the deep conversations with everybody. It was just that the travel was one, but also I think the fact that we couldn't focus on something we really loved and get rotated around was something that I knew wasn't going to be my long term trajectory. I think.
Yeah, for me, the point at which I decided to leave consulting was that at the time 2004, the tech industry was just kind of growing, and you can see so many
Right.
people trying to solve problems and stuff using technology. And at that point already, I think I had spent maybe 9 years in consulting, and I felt like, oh wow, the problems are starting to look like one another in a way that
Hmm.
no matter which client you went to, no matter which problem that you try to solve, you realize that actually it is a human problem, right? It is rarely a
Right.
strategy problem or a direction problem or really even a resources problem. It is almost always a human problem. And
Right.
so, yeah, I wanted to move out and pick a problem that I really believed in and see whether or not I could apply technology to solve it in a way lah, and minimize the
Mm.
humanness of it. Because I always feel that
Right.
humans are the biggest variables and the cogs of the machine that you can't quite control in any one
Yeah.
company. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely very true. So that's what were you thinking about that at Bain already? I mean, I remember for me, it was at Bain, I was building out this social enterprise on the side and I had no idea what I was doing, but it was starting to grow. I think I remember you asking me about it quite a bit
Yes.
at that
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I feel awkward talking to you about it. And eventually I had to leave to make go full time because it needed it hit a certain level of scale where we had so many clients, and so it needed me full time, and it also paid me a salary as well, which was nice. But I remember you quizzing me for a while about it, and I was like, "Why are you quizzing me about it back then?"
I really, at that point, and even now, I was really interested in social impact and, in particular, impact investing because,
Right.
because I wanted to see the effect of providing some sort of funding or some sort of starting point to small businesses in rural areas to see whether or not they could really spur on entrepreneurship and therefore kind of create a flywheel to get the
Hmm.
community out of poverty. So in
Right.
2000 and I think it was 11, I left to do an MBA in Insead in France, right? So I did part of
Right.
it in France, then I did part of it in Wharton in the US, and then I came back to Singapore for one of the terms. And then after that, I took 3 or 4 months with Acumen Fund in East Africa.
Mm.
It was for that
Right.
purpose, actually. It was so Acumen Fund is really an impact investing company, and they really, they take the funds and they identify industries with huge multipliers on the community. So I worked on projects like cotton farming, coffee roasting, chicken
Mhm.
farming. Actually, I found this amazing model for chicken farming, but there was chicken farming, and I looked at all these models and tried to see, how much if we put in like $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, how many jobs could it create and how much
Mm.
income it could create, and the multiplier was huge. And I learned one thing from there. If you really want to grow a community and help spur it out of
Mm.
poverty, you cannot use
Mhm.
donations, because with
Right.
donations, the nature of donations, it kind of disappears and nobody has any incentive to create returns. Whereas if you use
Right.
investments, if you invest in women, especially, the
Mhm.
returns on the funds are so much better than if you use donations. So, and that kind of
Right.
philosophy has really driven what I decided to do when I'm done with my MBA, went back to Bain, worked off my bond, did a couple more just to finish my whole consulting part of my life, and then decided to hop into entrepreneurship.
So okay, so you're doing this Acumen thing, and then
Yeah,
you also did an Insead MBA, right? So how does that work out? Like, why did you say like I want to be at Insead MBA, or did you? Well, I mean, because when a lot of people go to do their MBA, I
yeah,
think obviously one part of it is like, oh, I'm going to do the MBA for the learning, the community,
yeah.
to check something off. But also a lot of people also have that subtext of saying I may potentially transition my career along the way, right? So you did that in the middle of it while you were at Bain, but I
Yes.
was just kind of curious about why the INSEAD MBA and what the experience was like.
So at the time when I was doing it, I probably worked about 9, 10 years already. So I wasn't your typical 3 or 4 years and then do an MBA. So I wanted to go to a school where people would, sort of my classmates would be able to bring perspective from their industries and from a position that was senior enough, so that I wouldn't get the usual textbook stuff. I think by that time I would have done enough years already to realize that actually a lot of the textbook stuff don't really cannot translate so readily to the real world, because when you implement things in the real world, there are people involved, and that is the one factor that you cannot really control for. So I wanted a school with more mature sort of like leaders, or sort of like middle management, at least in their organizations. And INSEAD was an interesting one because obviously it was very diverse. It's probably one of the most diverse schools. There were people from all over Europe, US, and done crazy things in their life, from running restaurants to their own entrepreneurship, and people who were sportsmen. So I think that part of the MBA experience was very interesting. The other classroom stuff, I think you could probably even learn online. It's not super super hard to learn online if you pay a bit of attention. But hearing all these perspectives come together really, I kind of asked myself, like, hey, I always thought that I was a consultant or a career consultant, because that's what I did for many, many years. And it's funny how doing something for many, many years make you that sort of person till you think like, hey, I'm a consultant. But when I went to INSEAD, I realized that, hey, there are plenty of people building careers from a very different angle and perspective, and they're fairly happy as well, right? So it made me question, what do I really want to do in life, and really opened up the perspective that really, I've got this one life to live. I can pick, or I can design a life where I'm creating the impact that I want. I'm using the skills that I have, and I'm also feeling quite happy about the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, sacrilege. How can you be happy if you're not a MBB, McKinsey, Bain, BCG consultant, right?
Right?
Because like all other careers are tier two.
My God, and how can they be happy? They've never heard of like a 2 by 2 matrix. Like, how do you make
I
decisions in
know.
life? But
Why are these slides so weak?
but you know what? People
Yeah.
do survive. People get through.
Yeah, I mean, because I think in undergrad, I think once you're at a certain like, once you start hanging out with a certain like business crowd, right, whatever it is. So I was part of the social impact consulting club in undergrad, and so we were kind of like, on one wall was the social sector side, and the entrepreneurship side, and the other side was like the consulting side. And as
Hmm.
you went towards the more consulting track, obviously the prestigious jobs were like management consulting
Hmm.
and investment banking. I think those are the top two at UC Berkeley
Yeah.
in 2008 to 2011.
Right.
And Google and all these like tech companies were only just starting to emerge.
Yeah.
as like a place for business folks to join, and obviously didn't know anything about private equity, or even entrepreneurship wasn't really a big deal back in 2008 to 2011.
Yeah.
So it was just an interesting dynamic where things have changed. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the MBA was a great place to meet lots of different folks with different career paths, right? And a lot of
Mm.
people who are doing things differently, both from a personal basis in terms of family choices, values, cultures, but also from a professional career. And also, I think everybody enters in with an interest in resetting the career, right? So you see a lot of like people who are doing like, at least at Harvard, there was like a bunch of veterans, who want to transition into consulting, and I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, I'm transitioning from
Yeah.
consulting
To something else.
to and social enterprise to maybe entrepreneurship, maybe tech,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just interesting to cross paths, right?
Yeah, it's nice because and sometimes I look back and say, why was the MBA experience so interesting? It is because I think there are many people who are trying to make a change in their life, and not all of it is professional, right? Some of us are running towards something. So, for example, you are thinking of running towards a different career, right? So you want to meet people, you want to learn new things. So was I, right? But there are some people who are actually running away from something, a career that they did not love, perhaps, or maybe family situations, or like being in a different country. They were running away from something. And when you get a whole bunch of people who are running towards something and running away from something, it was a very nice mixing pot for things to happen, right? And some of them ended up being partners on a new venture. Some of them ended up getting married with each other. So that part of it where we could transition life together was really something else. I've never seen such level of craziness. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll say getting married and being partners in a new venture is pretty much the same thing on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure
I
you've
mean,
experienced a lot of that.
well, it's just like, obviously a marriage is a big venture. And obviously, when you're starting a new venture with a co founder, you honestly spend more time with that person than your partner,
Yeah, so true.
at home, right?
So true. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think it's lots of great friends. Okay, so there you are at INSEAD, and then, your brain starting to tick and say, like, oh, I'm having this interesting experience in creating jobs. I have this interesting set of experiences in Southeast Asia. Um, I have this interesting geographic view of the world. I've seen Accenture and Bain, and therefore I've seen the whole spread. I mean, and then at some point you were like, you could push a career more, right? You could have been like, okay, I'm going to make partner at Bain, and it's going to work my way from point A to point B to point C. It's a track, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes I tell people like getting promoted to partner is less about getting promoted and more about not quitting to do something else, right?
Promotion by default, is it?
Promotion by default, right? Because all the B folks all just went off to do something, right? Uh, you know, so you made a decision that you said, "Hey, I want to found something." So how
Yeah.
did that happen?
Well, I tell people it's all about wanting to change the world, but actually there were 2 points at which I felt like, oh crap, maybe I'm not in the right place. I think I was thinking about a problem, right? And then I wanted to think, oh, how can I put technology resources, and how can I arrange a business model in order to solve this problem? And then I realized, like, oh wow, in as a consultant, I would need to look for someone. I would then need to influence him, and then I need to put all these things in place and hope like hell that this person does that, because that's what consultants are, right? We are advisors, and we need someone to advise and someone to take the action, and then we support them. But what if that person didn't exist, right? Or what if nobody has the passion of solving this problem, specific problem that you have? Then you're kind of stuck. So that was one. And there was another point at which I was sitting on a table with many, many senior people in the insurance industry. They were really senior. I think they spent like maybe 10, 20 years in that industry. And they were also consultants from I wouldn't say which company, but they were also consultants, and they had significant experience as well. And then the CEO asked the question, and then the consultant went, I understand your question. And then they articulated in a really neat manner and say, in order to solve that problem, I will need to arrange a meeting on Monday with these folks, after which I will arrange a meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday with these folks. And by Friday, I will have an answer for you. So that was the answer from the very experienced consultant. And it was absolutely right. That was the way to do it. And then this other lady from the insurance industry, I think she spent maybe like 15 years. And she said, like, yes, I think we can do all that. But I can tell you with a 95% accuracy that the answer should be this. And then I realized, like, oh, wow, there you are. Those are my two paths in my career. I can either be that person who says, like, this is the structure and the process and the decision making tree or whatever that will get you to the answer. Or I could be the person who tells you with 95% accuracy what to do because I have done it. So then, I made my decision at that point that I wanted to be the second person.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's as tight anecdote around like I think the big decision for many consultants, right? Because obviously beyond the travel, which is logistical and lifestyle, and beyond the dynamics of the industry, hopscotching, it's really about the role that's really the crux of it, right? Do you want to be
Yeah.
an advisor and a consultant, or
Yeah.
are you going to be an operator, right? And there are different ways to be an operator: a founder, an executive, a CEO. Lots of different ways to be an operator, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that's something that I too also face, right? Because there I was consulting and making slides, and I think I had a great time. I think being exposed to CEOs, meeting CEOs, hearing from them, kind of being on the side for both great CEOs and CEOs that wanted help, and there's a strong overlap between both, right? Like
Yes.
it's not mutually exclusive, right? And so, but it was just nice to observe them and just be like, yeah, this is a tough situation, this is a good situation, and asking myself like, am I going to be a person writing this script and making these slides for him to present?
Yes. Or are you going to
Or
be
do
the
I want
guy
to be
who's
out
doing it, right?
there doing it, right?
Yeah, it's so true, right? And there's a place in the world for both types. I think, yeah, you just
Yeah.
gotta kind of
Yeah.
decide what kind of person you want to be. I mean, there are many times when I look back and I say, oh wow, if I stayed in this consulting track, definitely my bank balance will be much more than it is today.
Yeah.
And in a way, right, it's nice, like you said, being surrounded by some of the smartest people in the country, solving something, because there's just nothing like having a conversation amongst really, really intelligent top tier people and the kind of ideas they can bring out, right? There's just nothing, there's no feeling that compares to that. Yeah. As opposed to, rolling up your sleeves and being in the trenches and really doing something and realize that, oh crap, that was a bad idea. How do we roll that back? And oh wow, that was a great idea. How do we do more of that? And keep, having that velocity of doing it and changing and doing it and changing and doing it and changing until you get it right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something that you said true as well. To tie that is like, as an operator, you're really mastering the results in the industry and the
Yes.
organization. And as a consultant, you're really mastering the process, right?
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
and that's a very, very different mindset altogether. And I
Very.
think you have to master the process in order to be an operator, for sure, in some ways. But I think you can't overbloat the process as well,
Yes.
because the speed is important, right? And
Yes.
I think the type of problems that consultants are called in to do a $1 million project on are big questions, tough problems that are difficult to solve, but
Yes.
they're not the everyday problem that a company has, right? Which is like, how do you find a great head of sales, right? What is wrong with the digital marketing campaign and how do we improve it?
Yeah.
How do we increase the ROI on our initiatives? And people are like, oh, we don't have a great strategy. And I'm like, maybe it's just like, maybe you have 3 or 4 tactics that you're not working out, right? And if those 3 or 4 tactics are working out well, then everybody's going to say that you have a great strategy because of these great results. But
Yeah, it's so true.
like what's the crux of it, right?
Yeah. And the thing with consulting is sometimes you feel that there is the right answer. As in, if your process is right, you will naturally get at the right answer. I'm beginning to realize that there are not many things like that because there are factors that are not within your control or that you wouldn't know. Things like timing, things like how technology like deviates, right? For example, if you look at battery technology, 10 years ago it would have been impossible to figure out which battery technology was right. But today, obviously, the world has chosen one. So there are a lot of things that you cannot predict along the way, and that influence of timing is something that in entrepreneurship I think is hitting me more and more. It makes me realize how important this element really is. So those are the differences.
Yeah, I agree because, I think consulting really works when you're like working with like multinational corporations, working on high capital decisions, that are very complex, because then the right process in average helps remove all those biases, right? The complexity of
Yes.
information, the complexity of
Yeah.
geography, the fact that there's a large amount of capital that's like a, binary-ish decision that requires a lot of forethought before you make a decision.
Yeah.
But I think it's very different from like being a founder, which is like, what makes money, or like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, what does the customer want to buy, and how do we get them to buy more of it, and how do we
Yeah.
make our product better so that people want to buy more of it. It's very like fundamental stuff. And I think one thing I also realized was like, being a founder, being a consultant in Southeast Asia is so different from being a founder in Southeast Asia, because as a consultant, you're hanging out with all these multinational corporations. And so you're kind of like working at the regional business elite, right? Where every country is just a slide, So this is our regional strategy. And then every country has 2 slides, right? And there's maybe 3 more
In
backup
the appendix.
slides in the appendix, right? So it's almost like you have that regional pan view, right? Versus as a
Yeah,
founder, it's almost inverted, right? Which is, who is the customer and who is this customer in this geography at this time? And
absolutely.
then we're going to expand to another country after that, right? So it's like the
Yes.
sequence is like totally opposite.
Yeah, it's also because most of our consulting clients are those that are already multinational or regional, which means that their business model has been proven to work in many, many different geographies already. What they are trying to do is get that, from 95% to 98 or 99%, which means that you don't really have to reinvent the base. You just have to look for the extra marginal efficiency gain. And these ones, usually you can look by looking at a competitor in Canada or a competitor in Germany or something, right? And say, okay, if you fix these 5 different things, then you should, get you there. The problem with the whole startup space is that very often you are one of the only people in this space, which means that, okay, there's a comparison somewhere else, but those guys it doesn't really work in your space. So you are really one of 2 or 3 companies trying to solve this problem in that space. There are no real comparables. So in a sense, you have to make a hypothesis, and then you literally have to execute upon the hypothesis and say, like, I think it's like that. Why? Sometimes I cannot really say. It's a gut feel thing. And sometimes I might have some numbers, sometimes I might not, but I try it first. And then I time base it, and I say, like, okay, let's time box it. 2 weeks, and then we'll see the results. 4 weeks, and then we'll see the results. And if it doesn't work, sometimes we also don't know why, but we just step back and we try something else, right? So this kind of mindset can be very disturbing to some of our previous clients, but that's how it works in the entrepreneurship space. Yeah.
Yeah, totally true. I think that's so spot on, right? I think as a consultant, you're always thinking to yourself, like, okay, what I'm doing is, has going to have upside of millions of dollars, hundreds of $1 billion over a 10-year time frame. But yeah, you're right. It's still just optimization where 98%, of the company works. HR works, leadership works, the product sells in multiple countries.
There's so
They
much
already have a
data.
base.
There's so
There's
much
so much
data.
data
Yeah.
available. But just, we get hundreds of $1 millions of upside because there's such a large base to improve. That 1 to 2% improvement
Yes.
is actually a massive gain for
Yeah,
this whole
like
company.
300 million. You're like, yay!
Yeah, wow. We had a 300x return on our
Yeah.
$1 million fee, right?
Yeah, it's so amazing, right? Because the base is so large, like you said, like a small little percentage gets you a very big number on the bars. So even now,
Yeah.
in entrepreneurship, when I look at my bars, I'm like, how come these numbers are never as big as the ones I had in my consulting career? Right? It's like I have to do so many things to
Yeah.
get like so little millions. Last time I just tweaked one number and I had like 300 million. Damn.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I
then after that,
totally
you don't even
agree.
need to assume, do anything after that. You just write
Right.
assumption.
Yeah,
Assuming better operation cadence,
yeah, your
done,
people
right?
are not
In this
robots,
case,
and yeah, your
yeah,
CEO is not
exactly.
a psycho. Yeah, done.
Yeah.
And then if there are any issues, you just put like, here are some identified issues, and then like 20 list of 20 and stick it in the appendix, right?
Now,
Now you
20
have
key
to be like,
risks.
there are 20 key risks that you have to mitigate somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, and then actually and then you're the founder, and you're like, wow, these are 20 things I need to handle right
Shit,
now.
man, this,
And it's
this
just
is my
me,
to-do
right?
list.
This is
Yes.
my to-do list, exactly. So
Yes.
for us, it was just a row. you know.
And what's the worst thing? There's no one to escalate it to. In your previous life, you're like, there's always someone to escalate it to, right? Someone can make the decision somewhere. I just need to make sure my list is complete, and it's got like green, red, yellow buttons. And I told you 10 things, green, yellow, red buttons, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm done, right? But now that is your to-do list, and you're like, oh my god, there's no one to escalate it to. I have to do all these things myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's the
100%.
difference, man.
Now, next time I have to-do list, I'll just mark green, yellow, red, and then I'm like, I'm done.
And you feel
Next
better,
time.
right? And it's like, let me just put
I
that
feel
in the
better.
drawer.
Yeah, exactly. So email the slide to myself as a
Yes.
PDF.
yeah. It took some getting used to, certainly.
Yeah. So you made a transition, obviously, to becoming a founder, and then what was it like? Suddenly becoming a founder, building it out. What was it like?
I think there were a few things I had to get used to. I guess the first one was I was very lucky to meet very great co-founders. So I have two co-founders, Alex, who's based in Singapore, and Anthony, who's based in Indonesia. And I guess things worked out very naturally for us. We worked well as a team and all that. But it was only later on I realized how lucky I was to meet these two guys who were completely aligned, completely honest, and I never have any questions on any one of them. But I realized that is a rarity. A lot of people have
True.
problems with their co-founders, right? So I realized
Mm.
one of the things I learned was how important that initial partnership was, your co-foundership.
Mm.
That was very important. And then I also realized how difficult it was to get people, because in consulting, right, you have a lot of big bucks, right? So with big bucks, you can always hire the best people. But in startup ship or entrepreneurship, you have to motivate people a lot, because you're not paying people the biggest bucks. Your company is uncertain, right? Any time you might go down. So you need to convince people that you are for real, right? They know they have skills, but how do they know that you're for real? So you kind of need to convince people that you are for real. You have the kind of skills. You have a vision that's not completely built on the clouds, right? You have a way to get there, and that process is something that was it was new lah, and it was certainly very challenging. That was the second thing.
Mm.
And then the third one about managing like cash flow, making sure that is the endless balancing of the P&L versus the balance sheet versus the cash flow statement, and making decisions that optimizes these three things was something that we never had to deal with, because in consulting you're
Mm.
mostly dealing with the P&L, right? You don't
Right.
care how much cash the company has, or you don't care whether or not there's a lot of assets being written down every year. But you just worry about the P&L, right? As long as you can return stuff to your EBITDA line, can return stuff to your net profit
Right.
line, is a lot better. But in entrepreneurship, and a lot of times if you're a business operator, you have to worry about the cash flow impact, the balance sheet impact as well. And that is something that a consultant has to learn before coming in to become an operator. I'll say that those are the three things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very true point. I forgot about that. Yeah, managing cash flow is very different as an operator, and even more different as a founder, where you have no cash, or always going to run out of cash
Always.
even
Yeah.
after your raise. Is very different from being a consultant who's takes that assumption that there's capital to execute the
Yes.
initiatives you have to do.
Yes.
Um, and also, I say like there's also consultants don't think about the time budget needed to execute stuff,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is also is a form of cash, right? Because you're paying salaries and
It is, right? We just draw it stuff, right? In one phase, it's like 2, 3 months. Sounds about right, right? So we just say like, okay,
yeah,
phase one, phase two, phase three, right? And here are the
yeah,
targets and all that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
But there's no, I can't think of anything I really did as a founder that was like 2 to 3 months. Like if it took
no,
2 to 3 months,
never.
it's way too long, right?
Yes,
It's like
correct.
that's like whoa, like
Yeah, like what's going on here, right? 2, 3 months, you can get a product out to the market and be testing it already. So
right,
nothing takes 2 to 3 months, right? We always think in weeks, if not in days.
right,
Yeah, so
exactly.
that's something that you get used to. And some people find that they are very
Yeah,
uncomfortable with always speeding up stuff all the time, and they do go
yeah,
back to a proper corporate job after a while, because they are that kind of
yeah,
person. Yeah,
yeah. More conscientious in terms of like wanting to be more thorough and detail oriented, but it's a luxury, I think, especially in the early stages of a company.
yeah, certainly lah. I think more than anything, doing something different teaches you about yourself and who
Yeah.
you are, what's important to you, what kind of strengths and weaknesses you have. And if you thought
Mhm.
you knew your strengths and weaknesses before, when you start doing something which is out of the way, like entrepreneurship, it really tells you that, look, this is your weakness. And unlike what people tell you that you can always strengthen your weakness, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should hire someone to make up for that weakness. Because if you are constantly trying to fix your weaknesses, then you have no time to strengthen your strengths. And that's where they need you,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So yeah, learning how to team to make up for your weaknesses and really understand yourself, because your
Right.
company's strengths and weaknesses are your strengths and weaknesses, and they
Yeah.
will be for the first 5, 10 years. Yeah.
Super true. I mean, I think that's the toughest part, right? I think, because I think that's something that is totally different from a corporate to versus being a founder, right? Because as a corporate, you join a team because you got hired and selected for certain qualities. and all your co-workers are people who were also selected by someone else with similar qualities, and then you all hang out and you're all very similar because you all got selected for that role, right? If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, Especially at consulting, right? You're all selected to be problem solvers, a certain communicator, etc. And then as a founder, it's like almost everything's inverted, right? Which is you're the one picking people, and then you find people with super strengths that are totally different from each other,
Yeah.
um, and you have to move fast. It's very opposite, right? Versus being an employee.
Yeah, it's very opposite, and there's always the risk of hiring people like yourself because you get along with
Oh,
people like yourself, right? So you say like, oh,
right.
Jeremy is great. He's very much like me. We get along really well. Let's hire him, right?
Yeah.
But very often the people who are right for your team are people who are very different from yourself. So how
Right.
do you find people like that?
100%.
Yeah, it's not easy at all.
I think one thought I have is just like, so what was it like, building something from Malaysia, right? So, before that, at Accenture, you've been always working at a regional level. Even at Bain, you're also working from a regional level. And here you are building a company, of course, with a distributed team, but for Malaysia market. What was it like?
I don't know whether it would have been different if we were building it out of Singapore or Indonesia, but I guess I just happened to be here, right? So the first few team members were here. I think the first 10 or so. The year after we were formed, right, we really went to the market in 2014, and 2015 we expanded to Indonesia, and from then on, these two countries were very much part of our growth strategy. Later on, we moved our development team to Indonesia, near Institute Technology Bandung, where they churn out like good tech graduates on a yearly basis. So, what was it like building out of Malaysia? I don't know actually. I don't see whether it would have been different. Did we start? Had we started elsewhere? But don't really know. Yeah, what I could say on that.
I think a lot of founders are making decisions about what geography to target, right, in Southeast Asia. So you see a lot of
Yeah,
Singaporean founders who are like, I need to build for Indonesia or I need to build for Malaysia, there's a lot, and then there's a lot of Americans flying to Southeast Asia. It's like I'm going to build for Malaysia,
yeah,
I'm going to build for Vietnam, and I guess maybe one thing I always think to myself is you got to build for the market, and it's very
mm,
tough to build for a market you don't know. I mean, you can probably co-found with someone who does know, and that helps a lot. But it's pretty tough for a CEO founder to make allocation or tough decisions if you don't understand the consumer, right? So at least to me, it feels like you were building for the Malaysian market and consumers, and you're very
yeah.
familiar with these Malaysian consumers as your beachhead market.
Yeah, okay. From that perspective, I think I can answer the question better. Completely agree with you that the initial founding team should be very, very familiar with the market that they are addressing. Because at the beginning you can't afford to hire too many people, and if you have absolutely no advantage in that market, i.e., you don't know the market well, you don't know enough people, your networks are not strong enough to give you a head start in that industry, then really why are you doing there, right? So you really do need to understand the market. Sometimes, in order to make a decision, you need one of two things. You need either damn good data about something, right, in order to give you confidence to make that decision, or you need damn good gut feel. And your gut feel comes from really knowing the markets. So, yeah, so I would definitely think so. You're right to say that our solution is very much focused on the developing market, not necessarily Malaysia, but it's the problems that any developing market has. And when I say developing market, it is not Singapore, which is why we did not build for the Singapore market. Because in the developing market, a lot of things are consistent across Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, that sort of thing. Industry structure, a big gap between the people who can pay and the people who are willing to work, because that's your strategic wedge, right? That's how much your maximum profit potential is. Things like trust issues, are there already very strong infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure? Do people trust this infrastructure, or do they, trust a third party with good reviews and ratings, for example? Can people pay for the services? Do they tend to outsource this kind of services, or are they like, the Amor types that like to, fridge broken and then fix themselves? And then if they need like a car park, right, they go and buy the wood from the, I don't know, train station, and then, build it themselves. So I don't know if I mentioned this, and our platform Recommend Group, we are about connecting people to service professionals. So anything you need for the home, on anything you need for your business. For example, like plumbing services, cleaning services, electrician, pest proofing, pest control, whatever it is, we provide. So it is about people needing the services, having no time to do it themselves, but outsourcing it to a bunch of distributed workforce who is already trained and verified by the community. Yeah, so it's important for us to find people who like to outsource services rather than do them, themselves.
Yeah, I mean, for time saving,
Yeah.
productivity, also expertise, and
Yes.
many hands make light work, right? So what's interesting, of course,
Yes.
is that you built for Malaysia and the Indonesia market, and there's a lot of truth to that, right? Which is, I see a lot of Singaporean founders building from Singapore and they want to enter Malaysia, Indonesia afterwards, and I'm like, whoa, Singapore is not Southeast Asia, right?
No.
Not representative at all in terms of GDP per capita, in terms of like cultural attitudes, even in terms of like language, and tech preferences. So, but of course, there's been some successful, like obviously Singaporean companies. Well, I guess you could look at Grab and say like it's a Malaysian company that it's just
It
a
is a
company.
Malaysian
Yeah, there we
company.
go. Just like Hainanese chicken rice and just like Char Kway Teow. Okay, got it. Okay.
Oh man, don't get into the whole Malaysia Singapore thing, man.
And then you look at Razor as well, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
so I think what's interesting, of course, is you went from Malaysia to Indonesia, which is a very fair, I think, and very natural market
Mm.
expansion. I think you also see that the other way around, right? From Indonesia to Malaysia. I mean, obviously, on the face of it, like a mostly similar language, some similar, demographic and cultural similarities, and GDP per capita. What was your experience, expanding your market from Malaysia to Indonesia? So you're one co-founder from Indonesia. So I guess that helped quite a bit.
Yeah.
But what was it like expanding from Malaysia to Indonesia as a tech startup?
Oh, it was quite interesting in a sense because when we were expanding to Indonesia, our tech team was still here. So we had a tech team in Malaysia managing, the stuff in Indonesia, and then we had product managers in each country trying to customize the product and all of that. I think that experience taught me a few things. The first one was the importance of a local partner or local co-founder who really, really cares about the mission of the company. And we had that in Anthony, right? And because of his passion, he hired a very, very good starting team. And that starting team is basically most of the reason why we could grow to be the biggest in that country, right? And they were super passionate. They were working pretty much 24/7, right, to get the product up, to get the marketing, the business development, and everything going. So that is very important. And then the second thing is really testing the market and understanding the unit economics. A lot of things we take for granted, like industry structure, it seems like there's a profit pool there and this and that. But until you run the funnel from the beginning to the ending, what I mean by funnel is the customer acquisition funnel, right? Depending on where you get your customers to until you monetize the customer and get the customer coming back again, until you can figure out your lifetime value of the customer, with respect to the customer acquisition costs, you don't really know the market, right? So you really have to keep testing until you get a LTV to CAC ratio that really makes sense. And then you can tell yourself, I understand the funnel in this market. Right, so get to that point as quickly as possible. A lot of people like to win the market using free things, right? Like, or free for a while, free for whatever, come and use it first, that sort of thing. But running something for free actually tells you almost nothing about the world, apart from the fact that people like free stuff. And we all already know that, right? If something's for free, they will always use it. But the moment you start charging, even like $1 or $10, whatever is it, just charge. Because the moment they open their wallet is the point at which you really understand what they're willing to pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the second thing. And then the third one is when we decided to move our tech team from Malaysia to Indonesia, just because the skills there were more readily available. It became a bigger market after a while. So it just made sense for those two teams to work very closely to each other.
Wow. I think people are going to undervalue what you just said, right? Which is about how do you actually understand the market? And that's not just a geographic market, but even your normal customers, your vertical market is,
Yeah.
do you really understand the lifetime value and the customer acquisition cost? Do you understand the whole funnel? And can you drive it to a way that's like
Yes.
sustainable at a minimum, if not like, a strong set of unit economics? And I think one thing, it ties in well to what you just said previously, is like having a strong local co-founder let's and also you yourself actually coming from a place and geography that's very similar lets you both have that intuition about how to build that funnel and also the conviction that you're not building a funnel to
Yeah,
nowhere, right? So I think I see a lot of people, I see so many
it is
people
so
like they
true.
kind of panic because they're like
Yeah.
the funnel isn't, they don't know where to go, and then when they make the bets are poor, and then they also don't feel conviction they're going in the right direction, and then they just bail, right? So
Yeah, so true. And so the initial markets like Indonesia, I actually worked
right,
there personally for a few years. So that's the reason why I feel more comfortable as well, because I'm familiar with the market. I
right.
know people. I can ask them. So try to pick a market that you're familiar with. Like it makes life so much easier. And if you have a few people there that you can always bounce ideas off with, it makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, total truth there. So there you are. You
Yeah.
expanded to two markets, Malaysia, Indonesia, and there you are as the number one player in home services. Okay, and you're making a bunch of strategic choices. You're growing the team. You've done everything, and then COVID hits, right? So 2020 was quite a year for many industries. So from what I've chatted with you before, it
Yeah.
was actually a bump, right? Which is a positive upside. But tell us more. How did COVID? What was it like dealing with COVID as it came in, and how did it impact the business?
Oh my God. So last year, I think since March last year, it has been super like ups and downs, roller coasters, right? Because when the news of COVID first hit and the governments were all thinking of shutting down, obviously we, went into overdrive because we thought, okay, our services are mostly face to face, right? So, and face to face things will become a lot more difficult and challenging with COVID and with the lockdowns and all that. So what are we going to do? So we had like plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and it was actually measured on a weekly basis. If this happened, we will take plan B. If this happens, we will take plan C, right? And we panicked. So when lockdown came, I think it was March 16 for Malaysia. For Indonesia, it was April something. But when it first locked down, the first 2 weeks, nobody knew what was going on. And as a result, nobody serviced their aircon, no one did pest control, no one knew the SOPs, whether or not the service professionals would be allowed to cross the police barriers and all that. So volume tanked. Okay, so all our service professionals were really struggling at that time. And all of us, all these home services startups, cleaning startups, I think we all had the same discussion with our team and said, look, it's going to be really tough for the next few months. Do we just, follow the team, go and sit on a beach or something somewhere and conserve cash until this thing is over? Or do we, as we did, continue on and somehow try to survive it? Everybody takes some salary reductions and reduce cost to the minimum and try to survive. And then our team actually sat down and we asked ourselves, like, why do we exist, right? We exist because we want to help customers find services. And, to find a good service professional is not easy in Southeast Asia. So then we ask ourselves, in this time where your fridge is extremely important, your washing machine is extremely important, and disinfection is super important, do we want to be there for our customers, even though the numbers might not make sense, right? Because the demand will be like, who knows what the demand will be, right? And then our service professionals as well, they were completely in a mess because they did not have proper authorization letters. They could not pass roadblocks. They got harassed by police. Like, I remember there was one point of time where, I spent like nights talking to police stations because I gave them my personal number. And they all called me, right? Police stations called me and said, we caught this guy, he did not print out the authorization letter, but it was in his phone. You have to tell him that he has to print it out. And things like that. And I had to convince people not to arrest them because they were really legit working. They weren't, doing dodgy stuff. So at the time, our team had to ask ourselves, like, do we want to struggle and, go through this period with all our customers and our service professionals, or do we just want to take a break? And we said that if at this point where everybody needed us, we weren't here for them, then actually, why do we exist? So we all made a collective decision. Everybody voted. We made a collective decision to take salary cuts. Whatever it was required, and we didn't release like a single person, and we just went through this period together. You know what? The thing tanked for like 2 weeks, and then it started increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing, and we were like, hey, where is this valley supposed to be? And then we realized that, oh gosh, we don't have enough service professionals because the demand is increasing. Everybody's at home. They want to do up their places because they're not working at home, right? They realize that they need a proper desk. They need aircons to be working. They need us to construct like additional room and stuff like that. But our service professionals still had problem coming to the market. So then we had to acquire and acquire and acquire. And You know, ever since COVID struck, our volumes have definitely increased far beyond what they were pre-COVID. But what was interesting now, we needed to acquire service professionals of different types. So previously it was, the usual stuff, cleaning and all that. But now we have a lot of people who want to extend, the special study room. They want to renovate part of their homes. They want to lay proper floors, so that it's comfortable. So they want to make their home sort of like a pleasant place to be rather than just, coming home at night to sleep. So I think net, our business is a lot stronger after COVID than this pre-COVID. And the volume seemed to be sustaining. It wasn't like a bump and then it went down. People continue to view their homes as important part of their daily happiness.
Wow, what an amazing journey! Because I think a lot of people who are outside in a kind of look at pandemic, it's like, okay, these industries, pandemic was definitely a tailwind, and then for other industries, it's a headwind. It makes it sound very simple, right? But I think for the inside
Yeah,
out, actually on a chronological basis, I think every business was going through that simultaneously, like freeze, trying to understand what was going on, and trying to decide whether to double down and then
yeah,
how to do that. And I think you get a lot of credit for seeing the wave of opportunity and pushing the team, I guess, to figure it out. Right? I don't think not every startup could have done that, to be honest, even with that tailwind.
true. But the truth is, it's not over yet.
Oof, yeah.
It's still going on.
Yeah, I mean,
So
everyone's in, I think Singapore, Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia, and yeah, and Malaysia obviously are all back under some form of MCO or lockdown. Yeah, so and I think what's interesting, I'll just is as you think about that demand and supply, obviously, obviously we're talking about pandemic as driving demand in some aspect. But you just talk about something very fundamental, right? Which is the whole marketplace demand and supply, where you're like, you figure out and solve one side, and then after that you succeed with your experiment, and then you run off to the other side to, I don't know, chase the chickens on the supply side, right? So what's it like? Is that like a tip for people
yeah.
with two-sided marketplaces about how they should think about how to manage a team? Because sometimes it feels a bit erratic, right? Like suddenly one month you're doing demand and another month you're doing supply as a priority. Like, is there any tips on how to organize or manage a team to chase both at the same time, or on alternate months? Like, how do you do that?
So this is a very, very long question. Yeah, I think anybody who operate marketplaces, so we call it liquidity, how much we are able to corral our supply to meet demand at any one time. And there are some times where your demand outstrips supply, and some months you reach your supply outstrip demand, right? And for a marketplace, it cannot vary too much because if one side falls off, the other side will fall off. And you always want to get yourself in a positive, what I tell the team, the positive spiral. More demand, therefore more service professionals, therefore more demand, therefore more service professionals. The moment that reverses, which means like, too little service professionals, customers says that, oh, I can't get fulfillment anyway, why do I come? Less customers, service professionals, and that is a spiral of death. So for a marketplace, we always have to make sure things are in a positive spiral moving up. And I mean, there are a lot of things that we do, right, for marketplace to make sure that these things are always balanced. So, automated methods of acquiring service professionals. So, for example, when there's more demand, does your product naturally encourage more service professionals to come on board, right? And with more service professionals, how do you then use that to give more certainty to the customers that they are indeed getting the best of the best service professionals? So it took us quite a few years actually to work these things out. So these things are built into the product today. However, when you're launching new categories, it's always necessary to figure out what are the right carrots and sticks to get everyone to the market. This problem is not just in marketplaces. Yeah, in every on-demand is similar. I don't know if you've heard, but in Malaysia now, when the economy opened up, actually when the economy closed, a lot of people lost their jobs, right? So they all became delivery riders and food riders. And then suddenly, when the economy opened up, they all went back to their proper jobs. And then suddenly you have a shortage, right? So by no fault of the platforms, we suddenly have a shortage in delivery riders, and you cannot order food from anywhere. No one's available to deliver it for you. So so this is a problem that I think all on demand, all marketplaces have lah.
Wow, I really like what you said, which is not just the carrot and sticks by category entry, but also the team management. But I also really like the part where like explicitly designing features to help manage the other side when one side goes up or goes down, right? So that's actually a really good tip, I think, for people who are handling two-sided marketplaces.
Yeah, and it's not just the take rate, right? Because if you always think that you can play with the take rate in order to do that, you will find that you're always using margin to get people to behave the way that you want them to, and that's the worst thing because every time you throw promo codes, for example, or every time you reduce your take rate in order to encourage more supply to come on, it's actually margin dilutive, and you don't want that to happen all the time. So when things are good, you want to earn more. But if you find that when things are good, right, demand is going up, you need to use your margin to get people to the market again. Then you find that there's a dampening effect on your growth.
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah,
and
very true.
yeah, and I definitely am not the expert when it comes to this. Right, this is such a complicated thing, but it is the one thing that we've been trying to tune over the years, and it is fascinating, truly fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's actually an amazing insight there. Suddenly, just dropping knowledge here, because yeah, I think when you use, I think financials seems to be the correct incentives, but I think if you deteriorate your ability to collect cash for your own company, it deteriorates your actual ability to design product and UX improvements that actually improve the liquidity in a different form or fashion, right? Which is psychological or behavioral incentives, and I think this goes back to the existing bias for a lot of people who build two-sided marketplaces. They think everybody is an economic, rational agent, and so they think money is the big incentive for everybody, when it may not necessarily be.
It may not necessarily be. So, for example, we recently did a poll, right? And we asked our customers and service professionals, why do you stay with us? Because our take rate is not the lowest. I've never believed in throwing prices or throwing take rates, right? When it comes to a marketplace. And the reason is because we're dealing with people. So a factory can, if they had extra stock, right, they can always throw the margins on the products, because every subsequent product, right, as long as they cover their marginal cost, they're okay. So in a way, they can actually throw it for very low price. But for us, we can't, because we're dealing with humans, and every single human only has 8 or 10 hours a day. If they start to work 10 or 12 hours, they will exhaust themselves. So I cannot increase their working hours and decrease their take rate per hour just to make sure that they earn more, because there's a limit to that, right? So we never believe in throwing price. We never believe in taking the lowest take rate, because it's simply not sustainable. But instead, what we do is we train them, we prepare them to pass roadblocks, and we build relationships so that they know that come good time or bad time, we will be there to support them in whatever they're doing. And recently, when we did a survey, we asked them, why do you choose us, right? Despite the fact that you probably have one or two options out there, and they say, because you really believe in helping us. When times were bad, you were there, and because you help me, I help you. And I'm like, oh wow. You have thought that everybody, like you said, right, is an economic player, right? I just want to maximize my own returns. But turns out that loyalty does exist.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense, right? Because on a very logical way, it's like if you can preserve, a fair take rate, you're just using that to build out the rest of your team, which is your customer support, your ability to help, both sides of the market, better UX design. It does flow back, to them actually, right? So,
Yes.
it does take a little bit longer, but
Yes.
it's more recurring and more stable as an improvement versus take rates, right? Well, coming
Certainly.
out of time here, Jess. So I was just kind of wondering, when you look back, over your career, could you share about a time when you were brave?
Wow. A time when I was brave. Um, okay, so a lot of people think that coming from a consulting to a career where salary is always high, you never have problems with your money in your bank and stuff like that, to coming to an entrepreneurship world where sometimes you don't pay yourself for like 6 or 9 months. I'm not joking, yeah. Sometimes you really don't, if you don't have enough cash, right? I was brave. They think I was brave, but the truth is, I don't think that was bravery, because in a way, I have some savings. In a way, I'm building my skills in an area that I know that if I just needed to drop this and go back to work, someone would hire me, because the skills that I built are valuable skills, right? So from that perspective, I have a very strong safety net, and I know that no matter what happens, I can always go back to work. So I don't think that was bravery. But I think what was brave was starting this thing at the same time where I wanted to start a family. A lot of people put off having children or a lot of people put off having children or put off starting something exciting on their own because they think they want to start a family, because they think, oh, how would I handle these two things, right? I think that was brave of me to just decide that no matter what happens in life, I know, God will help me through it, because you don't know how long it takes for you to have children, right? I wasn't in my 20s where you could just have children at a drop of a hat. Something that you need to plan towards, something you need to try for a few months, that sort of thing. So I needed to start already. I couldn't just put it off until I was 45 or 50. So I just went and did it, and honestly it was very, very tough, because at the time where I gave birth to my first daughter, it was the time where we raised our first round of funding. And I remember at the time when I was in the hospital giving birth, and I know that my IC was in 1 week. And then I needed to train my co-founders to pitch on my behalf, and they are very different from me, right? I like to talk and I like to, explain stuff to people, but they are real operators, right? And some of them are also very much introverts. So I had to train them to get them to do an IC on my behalf. And honestly, I was very, very nervous. I remember the second day after I gave birth, I was in the hospital. There were slides on the bed. There was like my laptop, and I was on I can't even remember what we used, before then, but it was some kind of phone call. But I was screaming at someone to say, like, no, this is not how you present. This is what we say, blah, 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 blah. And then the nurse came in with I can't remember, it was some injection or some painkiller or something. And I waved her away. I said, go away, go away. I have no time for this. And she was like, I have never seen someone as ridiculous as you. You should stop doing this. And then 1 week later, we had the IC. We passed, obviously, and it was all for good. But that period was very tough. Having very little sleep a night, trying to pass an IC, trying to make sure that the cash gets through. Making sure that everybody was okay when I was not there. At that time, the team was very small, like 10 or 15 people, right? So it was not like you could get people to pick up your job all the time. So I think that was truly brave, lah. But if anybody was ever going through the same thing, I would just say, just go, right? You need to have faith that no matter what happens, you can do it. The people around you will rally to help you go through that period. And somehow you must have the divine confidence that, it will just all work out. Yeah, that one took bravery, I
Wow.
have to say.
What a journey. I mean,
Yep.
as a new dad myself, obviously, I just had to observe that process from the side. I mean, I was a
It's tough,
founder and
right?
I had to do a marriage during closing the Series A. So some similar dynamics there, but I think,
Oh,
trying to
man.
be focused on a marriage
Yes.
while doing a Series A fundraise is very different from, obviously going through a pregnancy and delivery and labor and all that stuff with fundraise as well. So I think kudos to you. And, I'll say, you're brave both ways, right? I mean, I think, the first one, yeah, I think you're right. I think we as people who have had the benefits of going to do our MBAs and having been consultants, we have that budget, our savings, we had that thinking to save up for that, so we have that flexibility. But still, I think it's still brave to build something from scratch, right? And like you said, it's also super brave to set up a family and keep going the business. It takes a lot. Wow, Jess, really appreciated you just sharing all of that. Well, coming on time here, so I wanted to kind of like talk about the three things that I really appreciated you sharing with all of us. I think the first one, thank you so much for sharing about your early career and your childhood, and yeah, I think you've been you call yourself crazy, but I think you've been crazy in all the right ways, right, to be a founder. So I guess it all worked out, right? And then second one, thank you for sharing. I think obviously, I think the dive between consulting and entrepreneurship. I think there's a big difference between being an advisor and an operator, and even especially within the context of Southeast Asia, like the 60,000 foot view versus
Yeah.
at a 1 foot view, right? And then thirdly, thank you so much for sharing. I think lots of great tips on how to run a two-sided marketplace, from the beginning to market expansion to dealing with the pandemic and doing the chicken and egg dynamic between both sides on the liquidity side. And of course, the last thing here is thanks so much for sharing your moments of bravery. I don't know. I really respect you for that. And I don't know. I really do. Because, I really struggled doing a marriage and a fundraise at the same time.
Oh no, those are tough
And
things.
that's tough. I mean, my wife was kind of like, giving me some,
Bridezilla,
glares
is
as I was,
it?
not Bridezilla. I was just very distracted while I was doing the wedding rehearsal, and I was just busy on my trying to close the transaction.
Oh my
So,
gosh, I can imagine. I can
so,
imagine.
so yeah, but that's nothing compared to, like, obviously having a kid as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great to catch up with you again. And hope to see you in person at some point.
By next year, fingers crossed.
Hopefully, hopefully. Get
Yeah,
vaccinated, okay? And then we'll see each other.
yeah, for sure. Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share this episode with friends and colleagues. Sign up at www.jeremyau.com to discuss this episode with other community members in our forum. Stay well and stay brave.